what's happening here. This is The Rich Stevens Show.
Truth talks, bull walks. Time for some honest talk. The truth will set you free. Rich Stevens Show. See the light. Rich Stevens Show. Rich is right. Crank it up, turn it up. Rich Stevens on your radio. Crank it up, turn it up. Real news coming in stereo. Rich coming to you live. Rich Stevens Show. Yeah. Open your mind. Rich Stevens Show. Yeah. Rich coming to you live. Rich Stevens Show. Yeah. Open your mind.
Are you ready? Because I got to tell you, I'm very ready. Hi, it's Rich Stevens. Thank you so much for tuning in. I do appreciate it. A lot of stuff to get to today, and in completely different directions, literally, because there's so many important stories that I need to tell you about. First and foremost, this Dallas cop, Amber Geiger. She's the one that last September, a year ago, walked in to the apartment of Botham John and fatally shot him. She testified that she'd just gotten off a long shift and was exhausted, walked into the wrong apartment, and thought that Jean was an intruder. He was sitting on the couch, eating ice cream and watching TV. But then prosecutors countered that she was distracted by a phone call, and then Jean posed no threat because he was sitting on the couch eating a bowl of ice cream. Now, I got to tell you, I'm really shocked that this cop was convicted of murder. She faces anywhere from 5 years to 99 years now in prison, which is just, unprecedented. But listen, she screwed up. Obviously, it's awful. But does anybody really believe, besides this jury in Texas, in Dallas, that she purposely killed her neighbor? How is that murder? Now, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not even going to try to guess, but, being a cop, you got to make a split-second decision. It happens probably every day. I'm sure at least once a day, once a shift. And the sad part about this particular case is this verdict now could give law enforcement officers a little bit of a pause that could mean the difference between life and death. Think about it for a second. Now, if it were a white person sitting on the couch, would she have pulled the trigger? I'm sorry, I got to ask that. But the thing that's so strange is, how did she not recognize someone else's furniture and decorations? At one point, the defense showed the red doormat in front of this guy's apartment. She had no doormat in front of her apartment. To me, it looks like, and this is just my opinion, of course, I welcome yours, 305-707-7878. You could either text me or leave a message. When a cop gets off a long day, long shift, now for we don't know how many hours she was on shift. For all we know, she could have been pulling a double. Somehow she got off on the wrong floor, went to the same apartment that she thought was hers, saw this guy who happened to be black, she's white, and she's now going to jail. It just, when I first heard this story, and we talked about it last September, I'm thinking that, she just worked too many hours and the elevator went to the wrong place and the rest is a tragedy. But these are the kind of things that, put the message out to other law enforcement that, hey, if you don't stay on your toes or on your feet and be careful of things, then you might have this problem too. I think this is probably the second time in a high-profile case that I remember a cop getting charged with a criminal case. The other one was, I think in South Carolina, that cop that was trying to pull over a vehicle, told the guy to shut the car off, put his hands on the wheel. Instead, the guy ran out of the car. The officer chased him. It was on body cam, and he shot him in the back. And then he claimed that it was self-defense, the cop. That cop deserved to go away. But I'm not too sure about this one, Amber Geiger. And speaking of things going on that are just, we know that racism is certainly alive and well here in the country. There's no doubt about it. But the other thing that you got to consider is there's also hoaxes. And I, for one, and maybe because I was in New York when the whole Tawana Brawley thing happened, which was a damn shame. Al Sharpton has still never apologized for that, and people still take him seriously, which is, to me, mind-blowing. But there's the story of this 12-year-old girl that is now admitting that she made up the story about her classmates pinning her down and cutting off her dreadlocks. The family of the girls apologized to the boys' families, and they released a statement saying, "To the administrators and families of Emmanuel Christian School, we are sorry for the damage this incident has done to trust within the school family and the undue scorn it has brought to the school. We understand there will be consequences, and we're prepared to take responsibility for them. To the broader community who rallied in such passionate support for our daughter, we apologize for betraying your trust." Now, here's the thing that's so amazing. This girl is a straight A student. And right now, we don't know if she's going to face any charges or not. Probably not, because she's 12 years old. And there's another twist on this story. Vice President Pence's wife, Karen, is a part-time teacher at that same school. Now let's, not for nothing, but 12-year-olds do stupid things. This girl is a good kid who obviously made a big mistake. But the question is, why did she do it? I mean, this will have a boy who cried wolf effect on real claims of racism if and when they do occur. That's the bad part. And everybody's eager to jump on this bandwagon because Mrs. Pence is a teacher there. And that's just not the way things should be. But this smells like, I'm surprised, maybe because they didn't have enough time, I'm surprised Al Sharpton didn't fly out there and get involved, and, that Benjamin Crump didn't offer to represent her and stuff, but she came clean. But how do you punish a 12-year-old? What would be a legitimate, punishment? Should there be a punishment? I go back, and when I heard this story, not only did I think of the Tawana Brawley story, but I thought of my late friend Morton Downey Jr. When he was in the airport in San Francisco, he got banged up, beat up in the bathroom by a bunch of skinheads, and they shaved half of his head. They put swastikas on his face, and I knew him pretty well. And I was interviewed back then on MTV News, when MTV was really a thing. And I said, this is my longtime friend, and if he says it happened, I believe it, because there were some people that were saying, no, something sounds funny here. And it turned out there was something funny, and well, not funny, but he did it to himself for publicity. A guy that didn't need any publicity pulled this hoax. And some people say that Jussie Smollett, the guy in Chicago, the actor, who had everything going for him, and he did the same thing. And again, I go back to what I said a moment ago. The big problem here is, of course, when something really does happen, when something takes effect, that's going to be a big problem. Because the people that should believe it may not believe it, and that's very harmful. I'll tell you what, it's just the world we live in, or the country we live in today, is just so amazing. There's so many good things happening, and people are wasting their time. The people on the left bashing the president. I got more on that coming up, and I got some stuff that Hillary said the other night on TV. It's mind-blowing. But speaking of mind-blowing, I wish these organizations, the public health officials, would get their act together. This is no good. This is good. Don't eat this. Don't eat that. Don't touch this. You never want to have that. It's okay to eat this. They just can't make up their minds. Remember, they did that with wine. Remember a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, they said, oh, red wine's not good for you. Then they said, oh, red wine is good for you. Remember when they said eggs are no good for you? Then they're good for you. There was a time when they said peanut butter was no good for you. Then they said it was good for you. And for years, public health officials have advised us to cut down on the consumption of red meat and any kind of processed meats because, concerns that they could be tied to heart disease or cancer or some other diseases. It turns out that this may not have been the best advice. It's laughable. There's a group of international researchers, and they concluded that this particular advice is not backed up by any kind of strong scientific evidence. It's a new study, and they found the benefits from eating less beef and less pork are small, and the advantages are so small that they could only be seen when studying large populations. And scientists added that the data wasn't big enough to advise people to change their consumption of meat. I mean, where does it end? What do we do? How do we know if something's safe or not? But this is a big shocker to me, because at this point, are people going to start eating more meat? And what's so funny about this is the timing. I am so sick of seeing those Burger King commercials for the Impossible Burger. Yes, it looks good. I'm not going to try it. But this news comes as the meat substitute Impossible Burger seems to be growing in popularity, and all these other fast food places are all coming out with their versions of something that's plant-based and not meat-based. I think it's great news. Who's having the next barbecue? Because I want to come over. Think about this. This is the kind of crap on a daily basis that just comes by me, and I just can't help but jump on and just give you my 2 cents. Here's another one for you. Some of these blue states are so scary. 2 in particular, New York and California. And what California has just done now, I don't know if you've heard about this yet, but it's very, very scary. California just cleared the way for college athletes to make some money. Now, you got to pretend to be shocked by the fact that wasn't a thing before, but here's the deal. The NCAA's longstanding rule has been that college athletes cannot make a profit off of their name or their talent. But here's the fun thing. The schools and the NCAA can. Are you kidding me? And a lot of lawmakers have been calling this situation out as unfair for a long time now. So did California really do something about it? They did. Gavin Newsom, who's the governor, signed a bill into law that allows college athletes to sign the same kinds of endorsement and sponsorship deals as pro athletes, as well as hire agents. Let me give you the fine print. Athletes can't sign deals that conflict with a school contract. Think athletic going to a Nike-sponsored school can't sign with Adidas, that kind of stuff. But still, pretty big change. Huge. The Golden State is the first in the United States to pass a law like this. Supporters say the new law could encourage star players to stay in school rather than drop out and go pro. But the NCAA says this law is unconstitutional, and it's looking for the next step. So it's definitely not a fan. Or I should say they are definitely not a fan. It says there needs to be a clear distinction between college and professional athletes, and that this would add an unfair recruiting advantage to all California schools. So you're wondering what the schools have to say. Well, they're worried about less resources and opportunities for their own athletes, and how could this negatively affect female athletes? And now the law is set to take effect in 2023, which is a long time from now. It could lead to California schools getting shut out of certain NCAA competitions like March Madness or bowl games, or it could lead to other states following California's leads and pressuring the NCAA to make a drastic change in their current rules. Either way, this could actually reshape U.S. college sports as we know it. But I think, and let's not kid ourselves, we know that there's money being involved in college sports right now for the players. I mean, it's pretty obvious, or it should be if it's not. But with this becoming law in an entire state, especially in a state the size of California with so many schools, there's bound to be some issues here. So I wouldn't, even though it's on the books, I wouldn't exactly, put my money down on it. It's probably a bad expression, but you know what I mean. I wouldn't bet that it's going to happen until I see it happen. And you're damn straight there's other states that are going to jump in on this. New York will. Probably Connecticut, too. Then there's a story of what's going on in Hong Kong. I mean, it's just amazing that we're not seeing more of this coverage. Because every time I see it, it's worse and worse. And tens of thousands of people took to the streets to protest the Chinese government today. and yesterday, and they've been doing this for a while now. Now, it originally started back in June because of a proposed extradition bill that set off alarm bells because of China's growing influence there. Coincided with China's celebration of the 70th anniversary of its ruling Communist Party. Now, protesters threw petrol bombs and police fired tear gas, but something happened that hasn't happened so far. Police also shot a protester. It's the first time this happened in these kind of protests. And so far, there's no word on the guy's condition, but, it's just, I'm telling you, people are angry. People are mad. And speaking of angry and mad, even though Congress is technically on a break for 2 weeks, the impeachment inquiry into President Trump is moving very fast. Now, the House Dems have scheduled hearings and issued subpoenas, including for Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, but the president is not slowing down either. He suggested that the House Intel Committee Chairman Adam Schiff, who is the Democrat from California, be arrested for treason. I mean, how great would that be? And he also quoted a pastor saying impeachment would create a civil war-like fracture. Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said the Senate would have no choice but to put Trump on trial if the House votes to impeach him because of the rules. But it's funny how only some in the House are giving up their 2-week break. I mean, if this is not a circus, I don't know what else is. I mean, it's clearly, we elect these people, and I've said this over and over again about term limits. This is why we need term limits. Technically speaking, when they're on their 2-week break, they're supposed to be home in their communities, among their constituents, the people that voted for them to put them in office. And they're supposed to be talking to you and me and asking what we need, what can make this city better, what can make this state better, or, whatever the particular situation is. So for those that are giving up on the break to stay there and do this impeachment crap, we all know how it's going to turn out anyway, so it's such a waste of time. I was just talking a little while ago. I just remembered something. Problem is I can't read my handwriting half the time. We were talking about the red meat situation. There's another thing that's very scary, and this involves a heartburn medication. CVS, Walgreens, and Rite Aid have stopped selling Zantac and also its generic version. And the reason the medicine may contain low levels of a cancer-causing chemical. Hello? If you take Zantac, you better go back and get a refund. Now, the FDA is looking into the risk for patients, but hasn't warned people to stop taking the medication right now. But you'd be foolish to keep on taking the medication and not go in and get a refund. I mean, come on. This is the same kind of warning that happened with actually 2 medications that I take. Actually, I took one. It's called Valsartan. They pulled that because of larger amounts of the cancer-causing agent in the medication. And then my doctor put me on a blood pressure medication called Losartan. And 3 weeks later, they came out with the same warning about Losartan. So I had to stop that one and then go back to the Valsartan, which by then was cleared. And then it happened again. So I went back to the Losartan, which has been cleared. I'm still scared to death of the Valsartan, though, because you don't know. I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of, think of when you go to the pharmacy, the same as when you go to a buffet. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. You go to a Chinese buffet, and there's things on there, and you can't read the signs. You don't know what half of the stuff says. My funniest sign I've ever seen in a Chinese restaurant buffet, the sign said above the thing, it said COLDSLOW. Cold slow. It was supposed to say coleslaw, COLESLAW, but it didn't. It said cold slow. My point is, when you're eating some things at the buffet, sometimes you taste something and it's so good, you have no freaking idea what you're eating. You don't question it, you eat it. Sometimes you go back and get more of that same thing. You know what I'm talking about if you like buffets. But here's the thing, when you go to a pharmacy and you get your medication, it's almost like a buffet in the sense that these drug companies get their pills filled from companies all around the world. Now, they have to be run through our FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. They have to get the seal of approval. But if you think about it for a second, it's very scary because there's so many pills that run through this country. How they were able to allow these drugs, and Zantac over the counter, I'm sure you realize that. The other ones that I told you about mine, those are prescription. But how do you know you're getting what you're supposed to be getting? You don't know. You really don't know. Other than it says on the bottle, oval-shaped green pill with the numbers 17 or whatever. And that's very scary. I got another scary story for you. She's back. Hillary Clinton said on Tuesday that her gutsiest decision was to stay in her marriage with ex-President Bill Clinton. Now, the former Democratic presidential nominee made those remarks during an appearance on ABC's Good Morning America, where she joined her daughter Chelsea to promote their book, The Gutsy Women, Favorite Stories of Courage and Resilience. Are you kidding me? Are you going out to buy this book tomorrow or today? Hillary said, I'm quoting now, I think the gutsiest thing I've ever done, well, personally, make the decision to stay in my marriage. Hillary opted to stay with then-President Clinton despite the fact that he had an affair with White House intern Monica Lewinsky. She added her gutsiest moves, politically and publicly, were to run for president and keep going. Just get up every day and keep going. And in related news, on Monday night, she was on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. I hate that show. He's doing everything on that show that he promised he wasn't going to do. But that's another time for another story. We'll talk about that another time. She said that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo should have spoken out about Donald Trump's phone call with President of Ukraine. Who is Hillary to comment on anything? I mean, if you think about it, with her destroying over 30,000 emails, with her crap that she pulled with Benghazi and tried to cover it up and say it was because of a videotape. I mean, really, why don't we talk about those things? They see that's what happens when you go on a liberal, left-leaning talk show like a Stephen Colbert. It's called like friendly territory. I remember during the campaign, I tried to get Hillary on because I had Donald Trump, citizen candidate Donald Trump on. So I had to offer to the Hillary campaign. They didn't want to have anything to do with me. I would have been fair. You know I'm fair, but whatever. And then it was back in March that Donald Trump suggested some extreme measures to stop migrants from entering the U.S. illegally. Now, this is according to the New York Times. He wanted to shut down the entire 2,000-mile border with Mexico by noon the following day, which his advisors told him that wasn't feasible because it would strand American tourists in Mexico and school kids on both sides of the border, as well as causing an economic crisis in both countries. So the president came up with some other possible solutions. Again, this is a story from the New York Times. He wanted to build a water-filled trench around the wall, fill it with alligators and snakes. He wanted to electrify the wall and add in flesh-piercing spikes on top. He wanted to shoot migrants who threw rocks at soldiers. And finally, he wanted to shoot migrants in the legs to slow them down. Again, look at the source. It's the New York Times, which really means nothing. Let me take a little sip here. Hang on a second. Don't go anywhere. Okay, thanks for being here. Again, I'm Rich Stevens. I appreciate you listening to the show. This has got to be, and this is also somebody that we haven't heard the name in a long time. She kind of like went under the bus for a little while. I mean, she didn't pop up, but here she is. Maxine Waters, the congressman from California, said in a series of tweets yesterday, late in the day, that impeachment is not good enough for Donald Trump, and he needs to be imprisoned and placed in solitary confinement. The chair of the House Financial Services Committee also said the Republican Party should stop using Trump's filthy talk of whistleblowers being spies and using mob language implying they should be killed. And then she added, but for now, impeachment is imperative. I mean, I cannot wait until later today when the president takes aim and fires back at Maxine Waters. I mean, Congressman Waters, what is it that you actually think about this? I mean, is she right for calling out the Republicans for not speaking out against Trump's inflammatory statements and some of his tweets? I think it's great. I don't have a problem with the president jumping out and saying the things he says. This is somebody we need because he opens his mouth and says what you and I are thinking. We've never had that before. We've never had a president that actually would help and say what he thought about, you know, real life situations. I mean, think about it. We're in a better place today than we were in 3 years ago. So, Maxine Waters, I mean, you should take that hat, get on a horse, and just ride into the sunset and ride away. Speaking of riding away, a few days ago, the NYPD said they're going to beef up security this weekend for theaters that are showing The Joker. In LA, they said they're going to do the same despite there being no credible threats. You know, the word credible threats is just ridiculous because anytime we've been attacked or anytime there's some kind of threat or attack, we never get credible threats before then. But this is a controversial supervillain movie, and sources are telling TMZ that they are doing all they can to prevent another mass shooting like the one during the 2012 screening of The Dark Knight Rises in Aurora, Colorado, right outside Denver. The NYPD is going to be dispatching an officer to every theater showing the film, which stars Joaquin Phoenix. One officer amongst, 100, 200 people? Really? There was an interview published on Vanity Fair's website yesterday. And the actor, he said, it's a difficult film. In some ways, it's good that people are having a strong reaction to it. But he added, you can't play movies for a world that is so messed up that anything can trigger it. Yes, you can. I mean, it's about time. You know, I got to tell you, I was not a believer about video games affecting people. But I think back how the terrorists that took out the World Trade Center used a game, a flight simulator made by Microsoft, which of course was pulled off the shelves after that because you could actually fly the plane into the World Trade Center on that video game. But this is very different. I mean, to me, and I don't know if this comes with getting older or what, but when I see these commercials, the trailers for The Joker, it looks pretty intense and pretty scary kind of stuff. Why are we showing things like that and allowing people? There used to be a time, I remember when I was a kid growing up in New York, you couldn't get into a movie like that unless you were above 17 and or had a parent with you. And, you know, the controversy doesn't seem to be affecting the box office because the movie is set to have the biggest October opening of all time. But now cops are in a catch-22. If they beef up security, people will say they are overreacting. But if God forbid anything happens and they didn't do anything, they're going to be blamed for not doing enough. It's like one of those catch-22 situations. I got to tell you, it's always a pleasure to have you here listening to The Rich Stevens Show. I really do appreciate it. Have a great day today. It's Wednesday. I almost forgot what day it is. And again, if you want to text or reach out, 305-707-7878, 305-707-7878. You can leave me a voicemail or you can send me a text, and I'll get right back to you.